I have a lawyer on retainer. If you do not take this stuff down, I will start pursuing legal action, and you will never reconcile with me. Before I get into the content of this, I want to establish some ground rules. If I see people in chat lashing out or saying anything dumb, you will just be hidden from the channel. Second, this is going to be separated into two sections. The first is going to be us talking about our experience and kind of discussing how this stuff is impacting us. The second one is going to be after we get our document together and get our screenshots together, and we go through with the people involved with that to refute some of the claims that are being made about us. It's no secret that two very stupid documents got released. One of them is somehow fallaciously claiming that we coerced No into letting us come out, but they'll let us, and she had her choice and she made one. And then, from there, people just go dumb and ignore what she did. That's not what we're talking about today. The second document is the one that's kind of important. As much as what No did to me is awful, it is only one betrayal. This one in particular sucks for everyone involved. So the third thing is do not harass anybody we talk about tonight. If I see evidence of that, you will be banned from our community. Simple as.
The most people could do is just block away from stuff, not have to interact with DMs with anyone you don't want to.
So while we're working on our document, we wanted to say something because obviously it's important. The second document is about my child, Adrian, or who is going by online as Spawn. I'm not going to play that game. I know what their preferred name is. I also know what their legal name is, but we're going to stick with their preferred name. Adrian is my 24-year-old. When I met Adrian's mother, I was 17. We started dating when I was late 18 or 19. I believe in hindsight that I was groomed into that relationship. I stayed, even though my ex was 3 months pregnant, and decided to stay because I wanted a child to have a parent. In that case, a father, but obviously things changed. In 2004, my wife, Juliana, was killed in a horse riding accident, and it left me as a single parent. I made some bad choices then. I will say for probably the first 8 years of my kid's life, I struggled a lot. Adrian is autistic. They are also ADHD. I only knew about one of those things. And it wasn't until they were about 6 is when I started going to therapy and trying to deal with the loss of my wife. I also realized that the relationship I was in was toxic and that we needed to do better with parenting. Adrian's a very willful kid. If they want something, they will do everything they can to get it. One of the big issues is that they would have sort of these clash of wills with my significant other at the time. And this became a pattern. Even as I did my own personal work and I improved, Adrian regularly would get this clash of wills after a certain amount of time with my others. My relationship with Zena is no different. By the time Adrian came into the picture, by the time Zena came into the picture, Adrian was already an adult. They had already graduated high school. They were either 18 or 19 at the time.
I think I might have first met them a couple times at 17. Yeah, they graduated that year.
Yeah, 18 before the year ended because birthday's in March. What are the claims that are being made in this document? They are numerous and stupid, but the most important ones are that my child basically has asserted the same things they tried to gaslight me on. They claimed that they weren't allowed to eat except for very specific times. They made claims about only being able to access the bathroom at certain times. They've made claims about us treating them poorly when they were dealing with their POTS. They have made claims about, they also made claims about us taking away the internet and several others, which we will cover in depth. But for now, we'll stick with these ones. The last year that Adrian was here was hell. Adrian refused to get a job. And between COVID pandemic money, because Adrian wanted to quit their job at Staples, they were allowed to do so. Obviously, it's their choice. And during the pandemic, they were able to collect pandemic unemployment money.
To make sure that they get.
They got around $24,000. They also had a
trust fund
that was about $27,000 that we had gotten when their mom died. Yep.
They also got massive amounts of money from Pell Grants to cover college, plus $1,500 every semester almost. for scholarship money,
Yeah. Because, and
in addition to the Pell Grant.
to be clear, the reason they were in college and they went for web development was because ZZ helped them get into that program and also helped them navigate the tech side of that portion because ZZ had gone to a similar school, has gone to the same school, excuse me. The first half of my relationship with Zena was fairly clear sailing. Adrian had occasional issues, but for the most part, the two of them got along. As time went on, Adrian started regularly crossing boundaries. We also started having space issues because during the pandemic, ZZ would have to be in the living room while I worked out of the bedroom, and this room that we're in now was Adrian.
The other big thing that was going on was that my very much declining at the time. Dealt with multiple chemical sensitivities, very, very severely so. I had a number of health issues going on. The way that Poppy started the channel, I was dealing with gallbladder issues, not to mention migraines were much, much worse.
Yeah. So long story short is that Adrian, when the health issues started popping up, Adrian really wasn't much of a help. They refused to learn how to deal with migraines. And so a lot of things fell to me, or when I was migraining, we just had to sort of take care of one another. On top of that, after they left their job at Staples, and after the pandemic lockdown started ending, Adrian refused to look for another job. Now, for some of that was fine. They were still in school. But after school ended, we looked into getting them into various programs. We wanted them to be able to be independent. We got them into the Center for Independent Living. We got them into
Michigan Rehabilitation
Services. There was one point they were talking about joining a D&D game specifically made for autistic folks to be able to learn socialization.
We also suggested them getting with the school for more resources because they had actually had a really great program to help get their students into employment. They had a wonderful program for that.
We also started working with a social worker to be able to help them become more independent. And we would regularly as a family go to those. In fact, there are still signed documents that give access to their health benefits. The reality of the situation is that Adrian has always exaggerated things in order to get sympathy. The two ways that they tend to be manipulative is either through trying to get sympathy through exaggerated means, or will feign not knowing something in order for someone to pay attention to them in order to get the person to do it for them. This was something that happened a lot. Adrian would be asked to do a task. Adrian would then eventually feign not knowing how to do it. They would screw it up, or they would just take forever doing it because they willfully were mad and didn't do it. And often tasks that should have taken 10 minutes took an hour because Adrian would dick off on them.
Adrian made it clear they would rather, and we're kind about this part, but like they made it clear to us that they would rather listen to music and take more time to do things than, try and do it more quickly without music, without a phone involved, right? Because if you're constantly on YouTube, like, you gotta kind of interfere with your task, doing a task sometimes.
So let's go over these claims. We will go over receipts at another time because we are still trying to get those together. We are going through 3 years of DMs, through 3 years of text messages, through all the claims in their incredibly poorly put together document that someone else put together for them, obviously. I also want to make it clear that despite people's attempt to drama monger on this, 61% of that document is just Discord vent channel. I want to be clear that a Discord vent channel is not evidence. Anyone can come into a Discord vent channel and lie about whatever. And Adrian did often because it got them sympathy. So, give you an example. We just named off how much money Adrian had. I'm not going to count the Pell Grants because some of that went towards school and all that. We'll cover just the amounts that I have off the top of my head. $24,000 and the $27,000. Because Adrian didn't want to get a job, their pandemic money went towards their rent and things. When they became an adult and they started working, the agreement was they would pay a small amount of the bills. This was to help them learn independence and to keep up with this stuff, which is fine.
And to contribute at various.
And we were still sharing groceries at this point, so they were paying into that. What ended up happening eventually when lockdowns ended, Adrian didn't want to get a job because they were trying to focus on school, which we allowed. And so the money from their pandemic money went to their rent and things. But eventually, when lockdowns ended and they got done with school, Adrian regularly would put resumes in filled with things about sales work rather than anything to do with tech, and then send these into these tech companies for jobs that they were not qualified for. This happened a lot. And so one of the big problems is that Adrian sat there in their room most of the time on Discord talking to their friends. At one point, we had found out that they had spent nearly $2,000 on furry art and toys from the show The Batman, circa 2004. $2,000. I know because I'm the one that counted it. So
over a very short period of time.
Yeah, over a very small amount of time. This kid would regularly go on clothing runs and shop, and which was fine sometimes. Like there are times I genuinely needed clothes, and there are other times they would just buy random stuff, like a whole fuck ton of stuffed animals.
They would go to the grocery store, come back with armloads of bags, and half of it would be stuffed animals or something.
Yeah. And so the issue is that what quickly was a sizable amount of money started dwindling quickly. And we tried to intervene by saying, okay, here's the deal. It's your money, but here's what I want you to do. Before you make a large expenditure, I would like you to talk to me. That's not a permission thing. I just want you to talk to me so we can discuss the expenditure. Adrian reframed this in their Discord vents to they had to seek permission, which was never the case, and then proceeded to have their friends tell them that this was a form of financial abuse. Now, to be clear, financial abuse as defined in domestic abuse relationships is something like a husband giving their wife a very small allowance, enough to get like gas and cover her basic expenditures, but nothing more so she doesn't have the resources to leave.
Yeah, it restricts your movement greatly as far as what you...
This is not what we were doing. Adrian still had a shared bank account with me where they still had access to all of this money.
They never lost access ever.
In fact, when they left, as a side note, the remaining 13,000, because that's all that was left by the end, basically disappeared overnight because they emptied out their accounts and didn't tell anyone they were leaving. We knew they were going to be moving out soon, but they left in an incredibly duplicitous way to the point where I had to make a second bank account because I wasn't sure if Adrian was going to come back for the rest of my money. And bills auto collect from my checking. So guess what? Fuck that. I want you to understand that one of the issues in our relationship often, and the reason why I'm doing a lot of talking right now is because Zizi's talked this stuff to death to everybody. The reason I'm talking about it is because I had to come to some realizations on this. It took me a long time to really understand the depth of what Adrian was doing because of my previous screw-ups as a parent. I had a tendency to dissociate when Adrian would get upset. And so what happened was I would get dissociative. I would start defending them, and this would cause an argument between me and Zena. Until eventually I did enough personal work in EMDR to realize that I was being manipulated. So I stopped letting that happen.
The other part was that I had to get very good at documenting what happened and what all was said, what was going on, because the stories that Poppy was being told were not matching up.
Yeah, we were literally getting two different stories.
That is why there's a lot of text messages out there of just verbatim, this XYZ happened.
So I want you to understand the money thing. I want you to understand the dynamics where there was this constant manipulation between the two of us. Adrian is sort of escalating any description. They at one point wrote a giant list claiming there was all these ways that we were abusive to them, and literally none of these were true. They clearly came up with this with their friends on Discord. We even went over it during like a session with their social worker and discussed all like a bunch of parts of it. And like this is just their modus operandi.
There were things on there that made no sense that we couldn't even figure out what they were. This was like 4 pages, single spaced, and like a lot of it just didn't even make sense. Things that had either never happened or were just so vague that we didn't know what it was. And so even if there were things in that press, there was no way to address any of it in that format.
So what I want to do real quick is I'll read something that I had previously written for somebody who asked this question, and I'll just go over that because it's a lot easier. What I want to say is that I'm going to try to cover these claims as quickly as I can, but I'm going to try to be thorough, okay? So that's the money claim. Adrian always had access to their money. They always had the ability to do things. There was just a request to check in. They often broke this request. This includes with buying a Geiger counter, but tons of stuffed animals and things like that. Again, I want to be clear.
Or they would lie to us about how much they wanted to spend on a stuffed animal, and would later find out that it would cost twice as much as what they told us.
And so what ended up happening was like a kid who had between everything over the course of a 3-year period, so 2020, mid 2020 to, I think it was like when they left in 2023, they went from $51,000 to $13,000. And we were told that we were abusive by them because we told them to slow down. So that's the money claim. I'm going to read you what I wrote somebody from our server because they asked about this. They were another parent and they wanted to hear from me what actually happened. So let me give you the best I can out of this. So one of the claims that was made against us was food. Supposedly we starved our kid. Didn't. There was a horrible schedule that that rigidly kept them from the bathroom or food or various other fucking things. A whole bunch of other stuff around that. So I'll just read this and you guys tell me your thoughts. So the schedule thing is something that we had house agreements on. Adrian is a person with ADHD and autism, and while working with their social worker, we devised a schedule for them. Schedules are helpful for people with ADHD. This is a provable fact. So my child had specific times that they would cook meals, both because it was a step towards independence and because we have a small kitchen. Adrian never ate the same meals as us, and having 3 people cooking 2 meals in the kitchen was impossible. An example would be dinner. Adrian was supposed to cook at 7 p.m. so that we could cook at 8 p.m. Occasionally, Adrian would lose track of time or dick off on Discord and miss that window despite being verbally reminded and having alarms on their phone. At 8 p.m., we would start cooking, and Adrian would attempt to do the same, which was not great. We allowed this to happen several times until finally we made it clear that they need to stick to their schedule or wait until we were done. This usually meant that they ate at around the latest around 9 p.m. They also had snacks in their room, could go get fast food, or order something in which the latter they did often, usually through Grubhub or things like that, as expensive as that is. There was no way they couldn't get food. In fact, like, there's a gas station just like a block down the street they could just go to and get stuff. We are super near a whole bunch of fast food places, including ones they like.
Our entire location is real close to the grocery store, fast food, gas stations, whatever you need. It's actually really close by. They regularly would walk everywhere.
One of the problems is that ADHD people, especially when they're on stimulants, have to be reminded to eat. Adrian had alarms on their phone. They would ignore them. They would silence them and just go back to what they were doing, either an art project or gabbing with their friends on Discord, being incredibly loud. So I want to be clear. When we go over this in full, I'm going to be looking at our checking accounts on stream. I've redacted a bunch of stuff, but I want to show you their meal expenditure money, because I can show you just 3 random months I've picked, and you can see Grubhub, you can see pizza. This kid ate out often. And there were several times they'd eat at home because Adrian never ate with us. So one of the big issues I had with them when they were really young was Adrian would never eat with us. We eventually had to work with a dietitian because Adrian refused to eat the same things as us, to the point where they basically just had to live off of like fruit, macaroni and cheese, and a few other clear things. This was due to their autism. Certain textures fucked with them. I didn't know what autism was at the time because I was a dumb kid.
Well, and apparently no one could figure out how to diagnose autism.
Well, because Adrian is AFAB and that gets missed.
And it's the 90s.
And in this case, it was the 2000s.
Right after the 90s, but it wasn't very far out,
So I want to make it really clear that, like, this kid always had access to food. The only request was, please don't cook at the same time as us. But Adrian escalates this to being some kind of claim that we didn't let them eat, even though they had access to food. There was food all around the area. They regularly went to the gas station down the street to buy Chex Mix, gummy bears, and various other things. They always had food. In fact, we often would go to Costco and buy them the big thing of Costco Kirkland sports drinks, because we would share that with them, because with their pots, they needed to keep up on being hydrated.
There's always the protein versions of granola bars. I worked with them numerous times to figure out what ones they liked. I talked over with them. They had a chance to try things if I could get a sample or something.
I'll get back to the room thing them eating in a second, because there's an important side note to that, but let's move on. One of the claims against us was they can only use the bathroom at certain times. This is a nugget of truth, but really, really escalated to the point of stupidity.
I can give on this one.
Sure. I'll read the paragraph I wrote and then go from there. As to the bathroom, there was no schedule except for in the mornings and at night. I had to get ready for work, and Adrian got into the habit of taking over the bathroom, which made me late several times. We told them that either they needed to get up earlier or wait. That's it. At night, we structured time for them to shower because they were skipping showers, and when they did take them, they were during my work day, which would cause interruptions in my sessions because the pipes in the wall were loud. So what we did is try to negotiate them either taking showers at night or taking showers earlier than me, because I would usually get up for work around 10 to start work with clients at like 11. You wanted to fill in some stuff?
Yeah. The other big thing to keep in mind is that Poppy didn't have very long breaks. Adrian knew this. Between sessions, Poppy's got maybe about 7 minutes total. Literally, that's it.
Maybe 15 at most if I can pull it, but yeah.
Yeah. But like realistically speaking, like that, it depends on the day. It just depends on which sessions to which ones. So, if Poppy needs to run out of the bathroom between sessions, she needs to go to the bathroom. The other big issue that we were having with Adrian was that I had physical therapy for treatment of migraines. And no matter how many times we gave them warning of which days that would be, when I needed the bathroom to get ready.
Because we have a very small bathroom. We have a bathroom.
Yeah, it's time. We don't live in a very big place. And seriously, so they were asked, and I would notify them, the day before, the day of, right when I needed stuff, right when I needed the bathroom. I tried all kinds of different things. They would always be in the bathroom when I needed to be in there getting ready for my appointment. And so I would oftentimes be kind of late to my appointments because they decided right then that that's when they needed to use the bathroom. and they would never.
Often because the only remembering was that someone else was using it or someone was walking around doing stuff. So that would be the reminder for them. The problem is that
I would literally send them texts 2 hours earlier going, dude, hey, I've got an appointment. Please make sure you use the bathroom beforehand. Like, it's really hard for me to get ready. Also, I have ADHD and migraines. I'm going to this for migraines. Like, it was a struggle to get me ready to go to appointments and to drive.
This is what I continue to say. Nothing of the above is unreasonable, and we have house agreements and bank statements to prove our side. The text messages are usually from arguments between ZZ and Adrian, and are missing the in-person parts off in the resolution. So what I mean by that is a small percentage of those of that document is actually text messages or anything that could be considered receipts, because I just don't count the 61% Discord venting. That is just vent channels are made for lying. That's my personal opinion. And Adrian would usually escalate things to get sympathy. So one of the problems was ZZ would put things in writing, usually through Signal, because it would allow them to have those things in writing so Adrian couldn't lie about them later. One of the problems is that there would be the debate over the course of Signal, but when we would sit down to have a house meeting or we would sit down to resolve these issues, which did happen up until the last, I want to say 6 months or a year, those were in person. There are meeting notes from those.
Yep, there are years and years worth of meeting notes.
But there's not text messages. So Adrian doesn't have access to those folders anymore because they were taken off of them when they moved out. So we'll be going over those another time, but that's the problem. You're being given a snapshot of a much larger process of a problem slowly comes about. Adrian is not honest or direct about the problem. And then what ends up happening is there's conflict over text message. And then there is a resolution that happens in person when we have our weekly house meeting. We've covered this before on this channel. We've literally covered house meetings. Last thing, the person said they didn't like the tone that Zena had used towards Adrian. This was my take on it. I'd have to see the specific screenshots again, but honestly, I don't think Zena was in the wrong here. As to the tone thing, I have no idea what that's about. My only guess is that the messages involved were towards the end of the interactions with Adrian. That time was rough. Adrian refused to get a job, would say that they wanted to take classes for independence, then just not, and left their room a disaster area with food on the floor. The worst was chocolate chips due to the granola bars that nearly poisoned our dog. I will admit that my tone may have been more cold than because things had soured immensely due to the above and Adrian's regular lying. So again, Adrian had granola bars in the room for their pots, among other things. Thank you, Mr. Hidden, for the $3. And the intention was to make sure they always had stuff to be able to handle it. Again, especially if they missed their meals, they had a number of things in the room that were snacks. What would happen is Adrian would eat like a slob because they have no table manners whatsoever, despite being taught many times to do so. And their granola bars would get chocolate chips all over the floor. Adrian also had very poor boundaries. They would regularly try to pull on, tug, or lay on the dog, to the point where Bunny avoided them.
Bun would just start walking away from Adrian, and and just go sit somewhere else behind me and Poppy.
To go further, Adrian was one of the people that took out Bun. Bun goes out usually 2 to 3 times a day. One time was me, one time was ZZ, one time was Adrian. And if one of us was migrating, someone would fill in. Adrian was taken off that list because Adrian would go outside, and because Bunny's a rescue dog, she would bark at people if she saw them because she got scared. Adrian wouldn't pay attention. So Bunny would lose her shit and then pull on this, 80-pound tiny person and yank them around. Now I want to be clear. Adrian has always been tiny. That's just how they've always been. They've always been smaller than the rest of their people. This is not due to eating or any other nonsense. They've just been small. Their mom was small. Their mom also suffered from a disorder called ectodermal dysplasia, which was essentially Juliana's dad had no hair. He couldn't grow it, except for maybe little fuzzy patches. And he barely had teeth because his body didn't produce the necessary parts to do those things. JJ, or Juliana, got a lesser form of that essentially made her teeth, weaker and her hair very thin. Adrian doesn't seem to have ectodermal dysplasia, but they did seem to inherit some parts of it. That is, for example, they're literally 5'1", 80 pounds. They're just little. That's it. They've always just been little. Back when I was a much stupider person, their nickname literally for the first 10 years of life was Midget, because they were just always tiny.
This was endearment. Please understand this was endearment.
This is not an offense to little people or dwarves or whatnot. That's just how I call them. So Adrian had to be taken off taking the dog out because Adrian would not take care of the dog's safety needs. And we eventually had to take them off that. And this was a regular trend where Adrian would be asked to do a chore. They would dick off at it at some point. They would just demonstrate they knew how to do it. And then they would slowly become slower at it and slower at it and slower at it.
Start forgetting various parts, not doing all the steps.
Like, I mean, doing mirrors for several months and then deciding to just forget. This was a regular manipulative tactic. In fact, Adrian's own psychotherapists in testing noted this. This was one of the major things they did to get attention. They would act as though they don't need something. This is directly in writing. This is not me making this up. People can yell at me about this, but I have access to this documentation. I know this stuff because I was given the ability to do so through medical release. I know this stuff. This is a tendency of Adrian to do this. The issue is that what's being sold in that document is a series of exaggerations, half-truths, and just outright lies. As far as I can tell, Adrian hates Zena, despite the fact that Zena went out of their way to help them get into school, help them learn a number of things independently. Again, I'm not always the best parent. There were a lot of times where I just kind of let Adrian coast, and Adrian did fine in high school and all that, so I just thought it was fine.
I'm the one that taught them how to ride a bike and the planner.
Oh, trust me, I've tried to get them to ride a bike for a long time. They failed at it every time. But
oh, they figured it out by adulthood, so.
But this is my point, is that like what's being sold in there and what's being touted by these people is a very, let's put it this way, a very narrow scope document that doesn't actually say anything. It's just a lot of Adrian being dishonest.
To be honest, none of these people are parents. Like, the thing that I keep noticing is that they're not parents. Like, we had right, Poppy and I are adults. We're dealing with an adult child, all right, but still an adult, was also very neurodivergent. And, like, trying to navigate how to still interact with this person on an adult to adult level, still get them skills is really difficult. Genuinely, we're not, because of all the confusion with Adrian's, abilities and what they were acting, we genuinely were not sure if at some point they were going to need like guardianship or to be in a supervised living situation. We were very concerned
because they were that's
how bad. Yeah.
And the issue is that we got them tested numbers of times. That's where their autism testing came, because I didn't realize they had autism. Autism's kind of a blind spot for me. It's something I've had to work through as a clinician. And so the issue is that Adrian ended up getting a bunch of testing done, and that helped a lot. In fact, there was a really golden period where Adrian was getting their stuff done. They were doing great in school. They were helping with chores around the house. There was no problems. They were on their Lexapro and just rocking. And then something snapped, and I don't know what it was, but they just started not caring. Now, to come to the chores real quick, I want to talk about this. People have said we had this 8-hour chore list. This is simply not the case. The chore list was basically like an hour of chores a weekend.
Most of it was geared to just, hey, wipe things down. Having it done weekly meant that Adrian's ADHD wouldn't get in the way and make things harder. So,
and if I remember correctly, there were things that were there weekly, and there was some stuff that was monthly.
The reason, period, but yeah.
But the reason for this was, one, we didn't know, but when we made this, so those lists, Adrian's POTS was still not known. 1, 2, ZZ was migrating on a daily basis. 3, I was working full time. We needed help around the house, and Adrian refused to get a job. So this was their call. This was their, if they're going to waste their money on covering their expenses instead of getting a job and keeping their savings, then we had them help out with things around the house just to get out of their room, because otherwise they would just stay in there. In fact, the only time Adrian would want to spend time with anyone was when specifically we'd be willing to watch YouTube with them. Otherwise, they basically wanted nothing to do with us, except when they wanted to know something or ask something, in which case they would interrupt or barrel roll through anything that was going on at the time. In fact, this was one of the big issues with boundaries, is when ZZ was stuck out in the living room, the rule was made that they would have alone time between after Adrian had lunch, so like 2:30, 3 o'clock to like, it moved around a bunch, but it was like 2:30, 3 o'clock to like 4:30, 5 o'clock, give or take. And the issue is that Adrian would spend every day coming to them, bugging them, like every 15 minutes, asking questions, interrupting them when they're having their alone time. And the problem was, because ZZ was in a high traffic area, this would start really fucking with them, because they really just wanted space, and they couldn't just go lay down in their bed in the bedroom or relax, because I had the office in there at the time. That's obviously not the case now. But
I also couldn't leave the house very easily because of the chemical sensitivities, because being outside,
walking the hallway of our apartment could sometimes just cause a migraine.
Yeah.
So
now I will clarify too. The thing that we came up with, Adrian usually took a long time to eat. Anyways, we knew that how they are. Um, right. They also had some other meal times scheduled out because again, there was a point where they started like almost blacking
Bye,
out
Mr.
and
Hidden.
falling into the cupboards, even especially like while we were out in the kitchen trying to do stuff, and like they would suddenly just not be okay. And we figured out that no, it was just that they weren't eating. They weren't getting up in the morning to eat food. They were just getting up, going on Discord with their friends, and then not up to get food. So even though like I had alone time, they were still asked to get food at 2. They were always said, we always told them, hey, even if you're not hungry, just make something. That way you're taken care of, have what you need, right? You know, your ADHD isn't going to make it hard for you to remember to eat later. Make your food ahead of time. They were always asked of them.
The issue is that how does this fit in everything? And we'll cover this more in the second part, but I want to give kind of like a light overview of that. And that is much like adding new characters to Smash, the hate mob, but basically started coming at me probably mid last year. But where it really ramped up was with No. These people took the woman who sexually assaulted me and weaponized her. And it was at that exact time when one of those people, who will remain nameless, broke, I would say, a fairly large boundary beyond just the weaponizing my rapist. They went out of their way to go find and dig up Adrian. Adrian didn't come out of the woodwork initially. They found them and then brought them out and weaponized them.
And this person, a whole big post and doc and everything was made.
And again, the person in question that did this, I am talking to. They have stepped out of the fray. That is my issue to deal with. No problem. But the problem is that initially Adrian was going to be sending everything through this person. And then Adrian decided to strike out on their own and start doing their own Tumblr blog.
When this person decided to step down because it was becoming apparent that the harassment campaign was snowballing way too fucking fast.
And so understand that between friends who were upset about optics splitting off, such as Beyond Safe Words and a number of other people, not to mention a bunch of people getting the back of a woman they had no clue of or what she had done. They just knew that they hated me, and so they just immediately assumed I was lying for some reason. No one has yet to give me any idea of why I'm lying about them, other than they claim I'm an abuser. But again, whatever. And then out of nowhere, my kid comes in and starts throwing out these things. And then these people begin a coordinated effort that sends in letters to my work that eventually gets me fired.
You want to be clear, Adrian is aware that Kiwi Farms is involved, that we are targets, and they're still doing this stuff. They are still going. They decided not to take anything down. They decided to just keep. They decided to put a short pause on posting, but would still respond to things. And then after that, that only lasted like a week or something. Not
About
even.
a week.
Yeah.
Now let's be really clear, because the thread that KF has made about me, because apparently I'm a lolcow now, yay. I finally made it. The issue is that because Adrian wouldn't walk out of the fray, they now know who Adrian is because they found their LinkedIn. The reality of the situation is that this has escalated to the point where we've actually had to talk to the FBI. We've had to contact the police so we didn't get swatted. Like, my address can be found given enough work. And the issue is that despite the suicidal ideations I dealt with for months being with No, we actually had to get my firearms back just for house safety. So when I make it clear that things have not been great, and the fact that Adrian came out at this time is additionally not wonderful, I want you to be very aware of the fact that this is very much a combination of a coordinated effort of people who have no limits and are willing to risk any level of collateral damage despite a woman they hate. Now, you may ask, how do we prove all this? Well, we have years of house agreements that were signed by all of us. We have
context for the rest of our text messages. We don't just have the clips, we have the full conversations for things.
And unlike Spawn, i.e. Adrian, we're willing to get on stream and actually talk about it instead of just letting this doc do it for them and then they go out of town. I want to be clear that the person that also brought them out of the woodwork got lied to. Adrian lied to them and said they didn't have medical insurance.
And that they couldn't access therapy because of it.
Let's be clear. I know how to talk to insurance, so I looked. Their insurance, as far as Medicaid is concerned, is still active. In fact, based on everything I can see, they saw their social worker recently. They're being treated for their POTS recently. To make it very clear, Adrian is lying. And I know any terrible parent can come out and say, their kid is lying about these things, but I'm sorry, sometimes it's true. I'm not a perfect parent. I suck at it. I don't think I should have ever been a parent. But to claim that I would do something so egregious as these things is utterly insane. And the evidence that people are using for this is basically just the rantings of a vent channel from Discord, a series of text messages, and random Tumblr claims. The fact that Adrian is going along with this and has let things escalate this part isn't just putting our lives at risk and causing a safety issue. They are putting their own safety and their roommate's safety at risk. The person that they are living with is also at risk, and that person has a lot to lose. I won't say who they are or where they work, but I will say it is a fairly prestigious place, and Adrian is putting their life at risk.
I gotta be clear too. Like, even when we started the channel, we made it utterly clear to them to never get involved in their online life. Talked about the risks. They were an adult. Like, we all had this conversation about what the risks were. Made it clear, dude, don't ever get involved. Doesn't matter what you think of us. Stay out of this.
It was not for them to be limited. It was because of safety, for this exact reason. At one point, Adrian wanted to start streaming. And we told them initially no, because we didn't want people making claims, making connections, because if they saw Bunny in their streams and our streams, very easy to make that connection. There was discussions about them not having Bunny in their room. There was discussion, this was before they started making, the chocolate chip problem huge.
The stream thing was also just really difficult because they weren't getting a job either. And so we were like having to pull double duty, trying to figure out like, dude, we need you to also be working on this stuff because you need to sustain yourself somehow. So like, how do we do both here?
So again, I want to be really clear that like Adrian's leaving went like this. Adrian started looking for someone to rent a room from and move to another city. And eventually they did find somebody. We had worked with them to do independence. We had them look up things of like how you write a resume. We sent them to classes. We made sure that they knew what to do and how to do things. One of the reasons why we had them do chores, besides just helping us because we were dealing with a ton of illness issues, was because they needed to know how to do them on their own, because otherwise they wouldn't do them. There was concerns about their hygiene. There was concerns about this. Adrian also had a bad habit for a long time of trying to find ways to make people uncomfortable.
That wasn't a habit. That was intentional. Like, they would just outright tell me, I like making that was a thing.
Their favorite way was to wear underwear that was too small for them and then proceed to
lift their leg up in front of us if they were like
or our
sitting
guests.
On a shared.
Often it was more guests. So I want to be really clear here is that what happened is that Adrian found someone to live with. They were in the process of going back and forth between the cities to find a way to make everything work.
They didn't have a job yet or anything.
They were going to get a job in the new city, which was fine. And then what happened was this. One weekend appeared, and Adrian asked to go to the other city with the intention of getting their keys and all that. And the problem we had is they had already started moving stuff, and our concern was if they left, they were going to leave us with their room, which was a disaster area.
It was trashed. We had agreements with them already written up.
So Adrian got it in their bright mind to pop the screen out of their window, throw their bags out, walk out, say, oh, I accidentally knocked the screen out, and bring it back in. Of course, we were busy at the time, so we didn't really notice. Put the screen back in, call their future roommate and tell them that they were being held or something, and decided to leave, saying they were going to go to the store when in reality they went to the other city and never came back. They also took out the $13,000 out of their account, never telling anyone. So all of a sudden I saw a $13,000 drop in my account, which of course I got a notification for. I had to then take steps to make sure the rest of my account wasn't stolen. I also had to then go through and clean this whole room. This had food soaked into it. There was areas here that were awful. Adrian had a very large, like, high post bed, and we had to take that whole apart. That's now down in our storage area.
They didn't make any.
Then Adrian whined and wanted their stuff, and so they left behind, mind you. So we put it out of the house, all safe and snug inside the hallway of our apartment, and told them they can come grab it. They came and grabbed it, gave them their stuff, no problem. We haven't heard from them since, except when some packages came because they sent them to the wrong place. Up until Adrian came out of the woodwork because of the stalkers, they had moved on with their life, and so had we. But now Adrian has decided that they want to weaponize their spite. So I want to make it really clear. You're going to go online. You're going to either find a Google Doc that has a bunch of nonsense in it, or you're going to find videos where people are going over this and talking about how true and cringe it is. I'm going to be honest. If you actually believe that stuff without any critical thinking, you are welcome to leave. Please unsubscribe from the channel and fuck off. I do not want people in my community that do not have the slightest ability to have critical thinking or be able to withhold judgment until all people have spoken. Anyone that has watched this channel knows that we try to be as thorough as possible, try to be as clear as possible, and also try to be as open with you guys as possible. When we're struggling, we tell you. When we're dealing with stuff, we tell you. The fact that these people went out of their way not only to weaponize my rapist, but also to find my child and weaponize them is disgusting. And the fact that they pretend that that document proves anything beyond just a bunch of claims in writing in a vent Discord is absolutely insane. And anyone that tries to sell you that, if you want to believe them, that's cool. You do that. Never come near me again, because I feel like if I have any conversation with you, you're going to forget to breathe. One of the reasons why I'm doing the talking with this is that, and I'm not trying to cut ZZ off, but one of the things is ZZ has been at the forefront of trying to help Adrian, support Adrian, and they got hurt a lot by this kid. And it took me a long time to realize it. And so one of the reasons I'm speaking up now is because I wanted to speak about this in a way that made it very clear that I am 100% in support of Zena. I know why Zena was so rough. I know what all the things that happened in the house that led up to those text messages. And I'm going to be really clear. After the shit this kid pulled, including having their own dishes and letting them rot in their room for weeks, or the first weekend that Sage came out, deciding to use the toaster and then leaving a package of tortillas on top of the toaster that then plastic burned and filled the house with toxic smoke, which then caused a migraine for me, Zena, and Sage. We couldn't leave our bedroom. This kid would regularly start crafts projects in the house that would then cause chemical sensitivities for both of us. I would get migraines in the middle of a workday because they decided they wanted to use their hot glue gun.
We did have times where we tried to talk to them and be like, hey, if you let us know ahead of time, we can try to figure out another space for you. We can try to figure out you going outside. We can try to see if there's somebody else's house that you can be at. Like, we really did ask them to let us know so we could try and work with them on things, but they never did. This is where a lot of the line got really weird, was that if there was ever an offer for them to work on something with, they wouldn't do it. They would forget about it and then, or at least claim they forgot about it, and then just keep going and keep doing the same mistakes.
Yeah. This was the regular issue we had. I love my child. I do. I love all my kids. Right? There are a number of kids that I've adopted over the years that I still take care of. Evan's one of them. Shiloh's one of them. I love Shiloh to death. I love Evan to death. I have a bunch of trans boys. They're great. We tried with Adrian for a year and really tried to give them every resource, every opportunity. And they dicked off with it and fought us tooth and nail. With the chores thing, people have made the claim that we gave them too many chores. We'll show you the lists. They weren't that deep. They took maybe an hour. Except then Adrian would sit there with headphones on, listening to videos, staring at the screen. And then suddenly, what was an hour of chores slowly extended to several hours later. So when Adrian claims, oh, they had to do 8 hours of chores, that was on them.
And we did try to ask them, hey,
can you stop dicking off and watching videos and instead just do the thing? And they wouldn't.
I actually wrote the chore list several times to even make sure that, like, all the prep work was getting done at the beginning. That way you didn't have to, like, run back and forth to get something 10 times.
We even let them have phone calls with their friends while they were doing it. Except then we started noticing that caused slowdowns. Anything that was a distraction, they would just get sucked into. Like, again, this kid had it easy. They had thousands of dollars at their disposal. They had gotten their degree in web development.
And they weren't working at all anyways. They weren't thing.
They were sitting on Discord and whining because they had to do chores. Because they had to wait an hour. Because our kitchen is small, because of the island we have and the table that we have. They had to wait an hour to make microwave macaroni and cheese that they bought that would take 10 minutes tops to get together along with whatever the food they wanted.
Part of it was just, like, there was even just weird stuff, like, when they reframed things, like, part of the issue I didn't like having them in the kitchen with me was because there was a safety thing. If I was cutting up something with a knife, they would try to scoot around me right next to me and not say anything. And I'm like, no, I have a big ass knife in my hand. Please don't do that. And they kept doing They would do it over and over and over again. And no matter how many times I asked them, hey, if you need to be in here and I'm cutting something, please say something. If you need to get around me, please make yourself known. Like, you're right behind me. Don't try and scoot real fast around me. Like, don't do that. It never worked. Never would do what I asked, which was let me know that they were there or they needed to get somewhere. What am I supposed to do?
In fact, one of the major issues is between the chemical smells and the being around people when they're using knives or anything like that. This was just a regular issue with Adrian. Adrian was awful about safety issues, including putting the wrong things in the microwave or complaining because we got them the wrong Tostitos pizza rolls or things like that. Like, we're talking...
I broke most of my bugs at this point.
Yeah.
And just mine, not Bobby's.
Yeah.
Just mine.
I literally have collector's mugs that were made by a place in Grand Ledge, Michigan. And the joke of it is that mine never got broken, but ZZ's did a bunch. Like, again, this kid would go out of their way to fuck with my partners. And this is not just with Zena. This happened with every partner I've had except for, I think, one of them. Anyone that asked them to do what they needed to do would get shit. So I need you guys to understand that, like, you can go watch those other people. You can go look at this document. I'm not going to stop you. But I need you to understand something. You're being lied to. And we're going to show you as much as we can with what we have. The last thing I want to bring up is a really bizarre claim that I actually find really offensive. So one of the claims that was brought up against us is that we didn't let Adrian have the internet. Took away the internet.
Well, they specifically phrased it too as you were isolating them. That's exactly what they would say. Isolating them.
So here's what happened. Adrian would spend hours upon hours upon hours dicking off on Discord or playing video games with their friends instead of doing the things that were asked of them. So the issue is that what we would end up doing, we would try to come up with consequences because they would lie to us or dick off. And the issue we got into was nothing worked. Adrian was too willful. So what we did is eventually said, okay, we can only do one other thing. And that was we changed the password to the Wi-Fi. We let them not have access to the main internet in the house. Now you might be thinking, oh no, they've lost connection with their friends. Oh dear. Except they didn't. We have a T-Mobile plan Adrian used to be on. They're not anymore. But that T-Mobile plan came with it a 10 gig hotspot. So not only did Adrian have their cell phone to be able to interact, talk with their friends on Discord, or be able to write them, they had a 10 gig hotspot they could connect their laptop to do the work they needed for looking for resumes, doing that kind of stuff, or just talking to their friends. In fact, I know they used that hotspot because they blew through the 10 gigs really quickly because they didn't understand how downloading works despite it being explained multiple times. Now, so they definitely still had internet access. On top of that, they would regularly go to the library to do work there for resume stuff as well as looking up certain things like, how you appear at an interview, things like that. The library is like 4 blocks away, give or take. And again, yes, this kid had pots.
Didn't stop them from going shopping.
Yeah, it never stopped them from going over all the time shopping. It never stopped them from doing anything they wanted to do. But suddenly it was an issue when they were doing chores. And so what ended up happening was we had to start making the guessing game of, is Adrian actually dealing with their pots or is Adrian lying? And there's no way to win that contest because it would only happen then. And so what we would do is make sure they had like sports drinks. We made sure they had snacks and food. We made sure they ate. We tried to do the best we could to make it so they were able to function and do this. Because again, look up POTS.
It's actually really treatable.
Super treatable.
Really treatable. With physical therapy, diet changes. So basically just more fault, really. And possibly some medication, eating properly, eating regularly. No, it's super fucking treatable. It's not that big of a deal. And if they did have an issue, we just went, okay, why don't you sit on the couch, get a snack, sit down, eat for a little bit, set a timer on your phone just in case you get kind of lost, and you get kind of out of it or ADHD kicks in, whatever. And then when you feel better, you start up your chore again and get that done. And we did. We had a thing with them of, hey, dude, you got to get your chores done before you get back online with your computer. We knew if they went back on their computer, they would get sucked in for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours.
Like, I want to be really clear that we encouraged them to take care of themselves and they got mad. Yes.
They were No, we had house agreements going back years requiring them to take care of themselves because they didn't. Because
including regularly showering because they would forget.
consistent sleep schedule. Like, if we didn't step in some of those past years, like, that would just be neglect. And I had to look at this and go, okay, yes, they're an adult, but also we live here with them. So how do we handle this? And we went with, no, we do need to step in. We need to tell them and make sure that they get medical care properly. Make sure that they get medications, eat consistently, have consistent sleep. That's why there were so many schedules in place, was for them, because they were not managing on their own. And this was a lot. A lot. Rough to keep up with. Especially with two people who both have chronic illness.
I have POTS. My parents basically what by the rule went by the rule, if you're not passed out, you're okay. It ended up being chores that I could do and asking my dad. Fair. I mean, here's the thing. I'm not saying we were perfect. And towards the end, the last 6 months, yeah, there was a lot more like arguments because Adrian was becoming. But I need you guys to understand that, like, when I talk to my other kids and I support them or are there for them, like, I don't have these problems.
A lot of kids on the server who have gotten help or anything from Poppy and I.
Hell, Nightwile and frickin' Chem are, I consider, like, under my auspices. Like, they have better conversations. I don't have the same stilted interaction with people because Adrian just wasn't interested in actually trying. They weren't really interested in actually dealing with these. So it wasn't until they got mad that they started having restrictions that they actually started looking for a new place to live. It wasn't because they wanted to be independent. It was because they didn't want to deal with us and us having some sort of boundary or asking for help and trying to work together as a household. Like, I'm not saying there were chores that we did. Like, a lot of the out of the house stuff, a lot of the running around and doing stuff, that was on ZZ. My job was to work and get chores done when I helped.
I generally took care of Bun too. Anything that she did,
including going to the vet. Like, we tried to so many times frame this as working as a team. And that's not to say we didn't do dishes. That's not to say we didn't clean things. There are plenty of times that we tried to frame that as this, really try to work together. But this idea that Adrian had to work 8 hours with no food, no one cared about their pots, blah, 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 blah. No, none of this is true. Also, and if you believe it to be true, I'm sorry. You're a fucking idiot.
So they didn't bother educating us about their pots. In fact, they told us lies about it the first time.
Zena had to do independent research and then call them out on it because they decided to give us wrong information, despite the fact that we literally found the packet that was filled with all of this information that they should have given us.
That their doctor gave to them. Yeah. And I went through and I highlighted things. But no, Adrian, you eating regularly and being on the schedule that we all have agreed on already is actually really good for the pots because it means that you will eat consistently.
I hate that I have to talk about this. I don't want to do this much longer.
I hate that I've got to go with it.
Because the thing is we did our best and tried with this kid. And I know it sounds like I'm being really distant with my language. And it's because, let me be really clear, I fought for so long to try to get everybody in the house to work together. I tried for so long to try to fix it. And eventually I just had to give up because Adrian would not play ball. I had so many arguments with my partner. So many. Trying to figure out what was wrong. Yeah, they would not work with us. They got on their Lexapro and it got better for a while. You know, they got done with school and it got better for a while. And then it went right back to being awful. And living with them while they were an adult for the last couple of years was fucking hell.
People seem to think that this is an 18-year-old, like a currently 18-year-old. That is the shit that they are constantly posting about Poppy and I, is that we abused a child. I didn't know this kid as a child. Okay. This is an adult, much, much older, who had access to who had swimming in money, more money than I've ever seen, frankly. I have never had that much money available to me, ever.
So I want to make something really clear. And I'll extend this again when we do the second part, when we go over the receipts. And people can talk shit and be really angry at me being harsh about this. But there are two pathways for here, and I'm going to explain both of them. So I'm looking and talking right now to Adrian. Adrian, here's what the situation is. If you would ever like to reconcile with me, you need to take down everything you know you're lying. You know you're exaggerating. If you don't, you're lying to yourself. You either can remove this stuff, which won't get rid of the document because you've already fucked up there. And it certainly won't stop Kiwi Farms from knowing who you are now. But You need to take down the blog and stop this shit,
And ask anyone else that you can to down too involving.
including the document. If you do this, I am more than happy to meet and talk and discuss and try to find some way to have a relationship despite all of this. ZZ might not, but I'm willing to at least extend that olive branch. Here's the thing though. If you keep burying your head in the sand, keep lying, and keep pretending that you're not somehow responsible for the fact that I lost my job, because you're a big part of that, as well as the fact that you're now spreading around lies that we supposedly abused you. You are literally trashing my good name, as good as it is. And the reality is that you know you're doing this. So if you would like to ever have a relationship with me, you need to end this. The other pathway is this. You leave the stuff up, keep lying to these people and letting them weaponize you against you. Because that's what they're doing. They're using you. People that are spreading this thing around do not like me, and you are aiding them and hurting my life.
Many of them were actually people that involved that were that did some kind of sexual harassment, us or others.
Or decided that, clout and money were more important than actually, someone's friend. They didn't really test out real high in the loyalty. So here's what's going to happen. I have a lawyer on retainer. If you do not take this stuff down, I will start pursuing legal action, and you will never reconcile with me. You have gone too far. You've officially crossed the line of you are now doing harm to me. Not just easy, not just the people you don't like, me. And the fact of the matter is you can either resolve this and still have your mom in your life in some way, or I'm done, and I will pursue legal action for everything you've lied about. Those are the two paths. And this is not ZZ's decision. This is not anyone else's. This is mine.
She didn't tell me about this.
And I've at least spoke to a couple different lawyers besides the one on retainer. I'm pretty sure that I have a pretty decent libel or defamation. So here's the issue. You know this shit. Drop it. Get rid of it. If you want to talk to me about the difficulties you had or the issues you had when you were, you need to A, be honest about them, and B, you need to be a grown-up and actually talk about them instead of putting them out there like this. You know better. I raised you better than this. I am utterly disappointed that you took this path, because you are not only putting my life at risk, because you guys keep making so much noise that Kiwi Farms was bound to fucking get involved, you dumbasses. But every person that touches this now is a potential target, including you. You never thought this would affect you. You never thought they would find your LinkedIn, just like never thought anyone would find your Facebook. The reality here is that, like, I can't do kid gloves anymore. You're not a kid. You're 24. You should know better on this stuff. I raised you better than this. The people that have been in your life who have been other parental figures have raised you better than this. Marcel raised you better than this. You,
Like, my friends stepped up and helped and did better.
Renee, Nick, everybody. Yeah. And you have spit on all of that because you didn't get your way, because you got some restrictions. And so you exaggerated these claims or just outright lied. And you're now putting a bunch of people, including your own mother, at physical risk. Now, don't worry, I'll take care of me. But what happens when they find your address? Or what happens when they decide to go after your roommate who has so much more to lose? The very nice person that you live with who works at the very prestigious job.
Gave you a deal on rent money and let you
Despite not having a job at the time.
Yeah.
But again, you don't care about other people because you didn't think this through, which sucks because you're really intelligent. I know you know how to do this, but you chose not to. So you have an option, a chance at future reconciliation with me if you drop all of this shit and stop it, and stop allying with people that want me dead, or not. And then you don't have me in your life ever again. After everything I've done, after everything I chose, after all the sacrifices I've made to be there for you, if that's the way you want to go, great. But if that's the case, I will pursue legal action, and I will nail you as hard as I can with the law. I love you, deeply and truly. But if you keep on this course of action, you are going to be dead to me. You are allying with people who do not care about your well. You are allying with people who are sycophants and people who want to harm me because they don't like me for whatever reason. Maybe I'm just too pretty. I don't know.
About you too, and I also deeply love you. It's hard to say that knowing all you did. I don't know if there's ever a way back to. I really don't. I spent years of my life and I hopped into parenting real fucking fast when I got with Poppy. I made a decision because I knew I was getting a relationship with a kid. And it sucks that everything went to shit like this. Because even when I knew that my body was failing me and I was not going to always function well, and I was worried that I would turn into a vegetable at some point, what life was like for quite a few years, I still tried to make sure that there was other services, other people around to help. And it was never enough for me that I just wasn't available. Wasn't as my health broke down. And I get to watch Poppy go through all of this stuff now with so many people and everything get fucking worse. And us both having to be explaining to every fucking. I am scared to leave the house at this point and leave our dog alone. Last thing I want is some officer finding out that she's afraid because somebody came into the house or somebody tried to come over. Like, no. This fucks up everything. And if you don't care about us, fuck, at least I thought you cared about the dog.
So here's the thing is, I'm just going to say this. I'm not going to keep this going forever. We could go on for days about how hurt or how upset we are. I'm just going to make it very clear to you. If you have anyone around you, if there's anyone around or close to Adrian who interacts with them via Tumblr or Discord, I want to be 1000% clear. Give them good advice. Tell them to end this. That is the best course of action for everyone. If they actually want to resolve whatever their issues actually are, that is the way to handle this. I am willing to still have a relationship. I don't think Zena will. And Zena's staying in my life. Sorry, that's how that's going. You either respect my wishes or you're not part of my life. It's very, very simple. So I'm not going to belabor the point. I appreciate people listening to this and hearing us out. If you still think that we're terrible, awful abusers, we're going to be covering the receipts when we get them together and get the document together, because clearly we have to make sure we do that. And then after that, I will not bring up this topic again. We will not be responding to anyone's videos. We will not be doing anything with this. And I will extend this same thing at the end of the next video. I'm not going to insult you. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to do anything, but I will protect myself. I will protect my community and my partner. So again, if you're someone around Adrian, give them good advice. Very important. Do you have anything else you want to add?
As usual, if somebody really needs to get a hold of us, can't figure out another way to do it, the transgirl therapist email, transgirltherapist@gmail.com is open. People can use that if they can't figure out how else to get a hold of us.
Yep. So I guess the last thing I'll say is this. I appreciate everyone listening, and we will try to get the stuff together as quickly as we can. I can't promise when. We are still working on it. We have another person who's been nice enough to volunteer to help get that together. It's still going to take time because we are going through years of stuff. And we have to be thorough because we're on the defensive. People believe this shit out of hand because they're fucking idiots and have no sense of actual critical thinking. They just like drama, which is why we're not responding to people or doing any of that nonsense.
This is our lives. This is drama. Like, it's drama in the sense of it's severe, dramatic, but it's our fucking real lives.
So, with that said, this is part 1. Part 2 will come out sooner than later. And yeah, I guess we will see you in the next segment. All right? Take care.